Adventure games were, well, let's be honest, they were kind of dying. I mean, once upon a time, games like Monkey Island and King's Quest were the pinnacle of interactive storytelling. But somewhere along the way, the genre lost its spark. The world moved on, embracing action packed shooters and sprawling open worlds, while adventure games, they fizzled out. But after Telltale Games stepped in, and suddenly adventure games weren't just relevant again, but people were actually enjoying them. This wasn't just some nostalgic throwback. Telltale was rewriting the rules. They took a genre that was on life support and infused it with a new life. So, how did they do it? How did Telltale Games solve the adventure game puzzle that nobody else could crack? There's something almost poetic about the rise and fall of the adventure game genre. Back in the 80s and 90s, these games were the go to for clever stories, witty dialogue, and some pretty ridiculous puzzles. But as technology marched forward, adventure games started feeling like they were stuck in the past. I mean, it's not hard to see why people got tired of wandering around pixelated landscapes trying to combine every random object in their inventory just to progress. Players wanted more freedom, more action, more everything. And adventure games, they just didn't evolve as much as the game needed it to. The industry moved on, and the genre became kind of a joke, something that older gamers looked back on fondly but didn't really have a place in the modern scheme. And honestly, the adventure game world was a mess of convoluted puzzles, pixel hunting, and storylines that felt more like lectures than anything you'd want to play on a Friday night. But Telltale saw something there, something that others had given up on. They saw that beneath the chunky mechanics and the obtuse puzzles, the heart of adventure games was still beating. It just needed a new direction. In 2012, Telltale took a massive gamble with The Walking Dead, and it wasn't just a new take on the adventure game, it was a statement. Telltale was basically saying, hey, maybe we don't need all those convoluted puzzles. Maybe the real key to adventure games is just a good story. And, well, a majority of people would say they delivered. I guess the thing that really set Telltale apart was how they put the player in the driver's seat, not with action packed combat or flashy mechanics, but with choices that felt deeply personal. It wasn't about whether you had the right item in your inventory, it was about making the decisions that had real consequences for the characters around you. And yeah, sometimes these choices were brutal. Deciding who lives and who dies, what to say in a tense moment, or when to stand your ground. It all felt like it really mattered. Telltale's innovation wasn't just about writing great stories, it was about giving us, the players, ownership of those stories. Like you weren't just watching a narrative unfold, you were actively shaping it. And that, honestly, was a game changer. It's funny because while Telltale didn't invent choice based gameplay, they somehow perfected it. They nailed this sweet spot where every dialogue choice, every little action felt like it carried emotional weight. And look, maybe it was all smoke and mirrors. Sometimes your choices didn't change as much as you'd think, but in the moment, it felt real. It felt like you were living the story, not just playing. Now let's talk about the episodic model because it was a genius move. Instead of dropping a full game all at once, Telltale broke everything into episodes, little bite-sized chunks of story that kept players hooked. And it worked. Fans would finish an episode, get hit with the cliffhanger, and then spend the next month speculating and discussing what might happen next. It made the experience feel communal, almost like watching your favorite TV show week to week. The structure was also pretty addictive. You play through an episode, get completely invested, and then have to wait for the next one. And during that wait, you had time to stew over your choices, to think about what you'd done, and to really feel the impact of your decisions. It kept the stakes high, and anticipation was even higher. And this model wasn't just limited to The Walking Dead. The Wolf Among Us had the same episodic tension, mixing fairy tale noir with a gritty, morally ambiguous world. Then there was Tales from the Borderlands, which somehow blended Telltale's signature narrative style with the chaotic humor of the Borderlands universe. It shouldn't have worked, But some people think it did. Some people think it really did. And now we're seeing Telltale's influence ripple out into other games, like Chained Together. If you haven't heard of it, Chained Together is one of those games that feels like it could only exist in a post Telltale world. It takes Telltale's formula of choice based narrative and dials it up, adding cooperative elements that force players to negotiate decisions in real time. It's like if The Walking Dead and A Way Out had a love child full of tense emotional moments, but with this added layer of collaboration and stress, almost making it kind of like a rage game. It's a game that's messy, unpredictable, and it can be chaotic, but that's exactly what games feel so alive for. It's a clear sign that Telltale's legacy isn't just about the game they made, it's about the doors they opened for other creators to experiment with storytelling in ways that we hadn't seen before. But as much as we can talk about Telltale's brilliance, we can't ignore their struggles. The thing is, Telltale's ambition kind of got away from them. They were releasing games left and right, picking up licenses for Batman, Game of Thrones, Minecraft, basically anything with a recognizable IP. But behind the scenes, things were getting messy. The engine they were using, it was creaky, outdated, and honestly kind of falling apart, and as they took on more and more projects, the cracks started to show. Bugs, awkward animations, clunky controls. It all started to wear down what made Telltale special in the first place. They were still telling great stories, but the technical side just wasn't keeping up. And then there were the working conditions. Reports of crunch culture, burnout, and poor management painted a picture of a studio that was struggling under its own weight. I guess you could say they were trying to do too much too fast without enough support for the people actually making the games. It all came to a head in 2018 when Telltale collapsed. The studio shut down, hundreds of employees were laid off, and a lot of projects were left unfinished. It was very heartbreaking for many people, as this marked the end for a company that had done so much to change the gaming landscape. But here's the thing. Even though Telltale went down in flames, their impact didn't just disappear. You can see Telltale's fingerprints all over the place in games like Life is Strange, which brought emotional storytelling to new audiences, and Until Dawn, which makes horror with player choice in a way that felt fresh and terrifying. Studios like Dontnod and Supermassive Games picked up where Telltale left off, taking the ideas Telltale pioneered and running with them. But whether they are as good as the originals is up to you to decide. And it's not just about other studios. Telltale is technically back now under new management, working on projects like The Wolf Among Us 2. It's like the company hit rock bottom, but there's this weird sense of unfinished business. They still have more stories to tell. And maybe they've learned from the past and we'll get to see Telltale fully realize the potential they showed us all those years ago. And maybe they should pay their employees. But that's just a side thought. Telltale didn't just solve adventure games, they reshaped what we thought these games could be. They took something that was kind of seen as a relic of the past and made it feel modern and personal. They reminded us that stories still matter in games, and the choices that we make, real or virtual, can have a lasting impact. Even now, years later, you can feel Telltale's influence in every game that dares to make us feel something, that challenges us to think and to care. And maybe the best is still yet to come. Maybe Telltale has been waiting for now to finally release its greatest hit, which many thought was The Walking Dead, but who knows, maybe they have something in the closet hidden. But that's for you, the players,